Crisis has a way of revealing us. Not the version of us that we present when everything is calm and nice and happy. Not the version of us that talks about faith or courage, peace, or alignment when things in life are easy. Crisis reveals what has been cultivated within us. When the pressure rises, something in us activates. Fear can take over. Old patterns can certainly return. The nervous system, our body, our temple collapses into survival for most of us. The lesser self starts to grasp for control. But crisis can also do something else. It can awaken courage. It can sharpen our clarity, our awareness. It can reveal strength we did not know we had. It can open a doorway into a whole brand new direction. The path of light does not promise a life without crisis. It teaches us how to meet crisis without losing ourselves. I'm Justin Gates. Joining me today is Michael Perry, as always, and you're listening to the new Ashla Podcast. Hello and welcome to the new Ashla Podcast. We're so happy you joined us today. So, Michael, today we're going to be talking about crisis and how crisis can lead us to creation, being better creators for our life.
You know, I love the term crisis because this is one of my favorite topics to dive into. This is where we meet our clients, right? This is where we get people to come into the fold because it's only in crisis, like you said, we find clarity. It may not be good clarity. It may not be clarity we want, but it's clarity. And often we don't know what to do with it. I've always labeled it as suffering, that it's in suffering is where we really see the truth. And one thing that has echoed in my mind since I first started training with you was something you told me, and that is that when crisis hits, when we are in these dark moments, we rise to the lowest level of our training. And it is in these moments of crisis does our true selves become, not our true selves, the lower self is what it is. When these mechanisms that have been driving us flare up on full throttle and they go head first, and we start to see all these things about ourselves we get a magnification on our coping mechanisms.
Yeah. Well, crisis is kind of the peak of suffering. So when I talk about suffering, or when I talk about crisis, you've already been suffering a lot. And this one thing, whatever it is that pushes you over the edge, right? That's the crisis. That's something that's happening in your life, around your life, to yourself, to others, or whatever. But there's generally there's a ramping up of that suffering, right? So you're also right. Suffering is a part of this. And in this episode today, we're talking about what happens when that peak of suffering, that crisis, activates fear and survival and brings back these old patterns. But how that same pressure, that same heat, that same pounding, like you're in a forge, right, can become creative power when met with awareness. So we're going to look at why crisis reveals what is leading within us and how fear can either collapse us or fuel us, and how to keep the light as our aim when life becomes difficult. I want you guys to kind of, not fully consciously, but kind of think back to the show we did recently about aiming and what we're aiming at, what our desires are pointing at, right? It's going to kind of tie into this episode today. So for us at Ashla, this is really, these crises are really a test of awareness for us, a test of our faith, a test of our courage, really, honestly, a test of our self-mastery. And not because crises are good. I have never met a crisis in my life that I was really, hey, thanks, pal.
Thrilled it was there.
Right. But because even in difficulty, the light can still reveal the next right step for us. So
one thing I want to add before we move too far, because I don't think I finished where I was going with my point earlier. What I love about crisis, the reason I am so passionate about crisis is not because I get coaching clients. What I love is that is the moment where life asks us, are you ready for the change you've been begging for? It is the moment where life gives you the opportunity to grow beyond who you've been and how you survived. And it is the most magical period, not because it's beautiful and bliss, but because those are the fires of the phoenix that burn you down and help you resurrect as a whole new person.
Yeah, we don't spend a lot of energy around here labeling things good or bad, right? Because we find both fortune and misfortune in each other, in both things, right? It's what we resonate with. It's what we're focusing our attention on. Things that hurt, things that put us in these tough situations, and they can break us, they can beat us down, or we can turn that into a forge, right? And we can turn that into a teacher and go through the hard thing, go through the stress, go through the heat, and come out sharper, right? More useful. So yeah, there's nothing wrong with looking challenge in the eye and saying, okay, this is what you got. This is what you got from me. And roll your sleeves up, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today, because yes, crises are a really tough thing to deal with. In another episode, in the episode before this, you guys heard me talk about my recent struggles, my recent crises. So let all this stuff kind of mend together, because it is kind of one long thing, and all this stuff does complement the next thing. And even the shows that Michael's doing on attachment right now, you're going to see little pieces of that in here too, because all this stuff, it all connects, doesn't it? Right?
Yeah.
Michael, before we get into the show, can you please remind folks about the companions, the episode companions, so that they know to jump on it right now before we get into the show, and they can follow along with that?
No, I'm glad you brought that up now, because I know, man, even I'm one of those people. I'll listen to a podcast. Once it gets sorted to the conclusions, I'll be like, all right, I'm out of here. But guys, check it out. Inside the show notes, you're going to find a link. It's a download link where you can download a companion guide that'll help you work on this very issue, the exact topics we're talking about in this episode. It can help you follow along with the episode, but most importantly, it's something you can take after to help reflect on your journey and help and the struggles you're going through. And we're including this on every episode when we go over different topics that resonates with you. Here's a tool that you can utilize to help gain control over your life.
Yeah, it's a great tool. It's and all praise goes to Michael on this. He worked very hard on that, and it's like you're getting 2 episodes in one. Really, I tested the thing, and I went through it. I let it guide me as the episode was playing out. I listened to a recent episode, and I went through the companion guide, and it's in lockstep. It's perfect. It does a great job that way. And also, it's something great that you can come back to. What I love about these companion guides, they act just like the axioms do, where the axiom meets you in a different spot every time you come back to them, right? So these companion guides and these episodes that we've been putting together, they too work that way. So you're going to get a different show every time you come back and visit these episodes, especially if you use that companion guide. So, Michael, great job on that.
You don't need to print it off. It's interactive on the phone. And then soon we will start having deeper, if you end up using the companion guide and it helps you, we'll have on our website here in the near future a sanctuary guide, which is where we're going to keep our library of our blogs and our podcast episodes. And in there, the sanctuary guide can be something that you can use daily. It'll be a much longer format of these companion guides to help you really use it as a journal and a reflection tool for the days to come as you work through these issues. So yeah, definitely give it a check out. Yeah.
Great job on that. It enhances the experience of this podcast and the community and the coaching and the stuff that we're building for you. It enhances it 100-fold. So, and it's at the top of every show notes. So if you're not used to going to the show notes, if you only look at us on Facebook, I always put them, I'm starting to put them in the first comment of each episode that we share. So you can find it there. The easiest way is to go to Spotify and just click right on it. It takes you right to it. And you can do that from your phone or your computer. And like you said, it's completely interactive. You can fill it out as you go on the computer or on your phone.
And if you sign up for the newsletter, I'll have the direct links in there as well. Which that'll start coming out here within the next week or two.
Nice. So the problem that we have today in this episode is that crisis does not only challenge the situation around us, and it doesn't just challenge us profoundly sometimes, it really exposes what has been leading within us, as I said. And, we always talk about how life is easy when life is calm. Right. And that sounds like a silly thing to say, but it's a truth that lots of us seem to forget. It's easy to believe in things when we are perfectly grounded and not being blown around. It's easy to believe that we are peaceful. It's easy to believe that we are aligned and faithful and patient and a little courageous when things are good. Crisis applies pressure, and pressure reveals, as you said, Michael, pressure reveals things about us that we don't like sometimes. And if fear has been leading you, crisis will amplify that. If you've been kind of a control freak for a long time, crisis makes you try to grab on harder. If resentment has been leading the desires of your heart, crisis gives that resentment a voice and makes it louder. If avoidance, we talked about this in Michael's last show, the avoidant personality, right? The avoidant attachment. If that avoidance has been leading, crisis will make you want to crawl under the biggest rock you can find and disappear. But Michael, what happens when we let awareness and true courage and true faith and true discipline, these things that we've cultivated in ourselves, what does crisis reveal about those, if those are our leading attributes?
So I don't know if my answer is going to be what you're going for, but because I'll be honest, a lot of these things are virtues. Like, I know when I went through my big dark night of the soul, the most transformational period of my life, I thought I had these things in abundance until life happened. And it showed me just how strong my courage was, just how strong my resilience was, how self-aware I actually was. And don't get me wrong, it wasn't that these things were lacking, but it's that it required more of me than I had ever given before. It required deeper introspection and deeper questioning of what my motives were. It required more honesty with who I was as a person and how I was showing up. It required me to humble myself and accept that I may not be as perfect as I thought I was.
But I'm sure you also found some traces of these things within you too, because that's what these crises do to us. They strip away illusion. They just strip it away completely. And it shows us the difference between what we believe about ourselves and what we've actually practiced within ourselves, as you said. So your answer was
what we
perfect.
Embody.
Yes.
Well, and I think one of the most important things is it requires all of these things to come out on the other side. One of my biggest mottos with people is when we are going through suffering, when we are going through crisis, we either come out bitter or we come out better. And it's all about how much. I love what you led this with how the key is looking for the light, because that is the truth. If you hold on to the light, it will guide your path. It won't be easy. It will not be linear, but it will lead you to the best possible place you could arrive at. And often it's greater than what you could even imagine.
Yeah. And these things happen to all of us. They could be a health issue, something I've been dealing with a lot lately. A relationship that is broken or breaking, some kind of financial setback, right? Big loss or a big conflict.
Death of a loved one.
Death of a loved one. But there is a decisive moment that happens inside when these things happen. These things may come from outside, but guess what? Just like in all things we teach here, the real stuff starts to happen inside us, right? Because we get to decide what is going to lead us along after this. Fear or wisdom, panic or presence, survival or should we try to align? Because the lesser self reacts from fear and from control and from trying to stay alive or survive. It wants to escape pain, like we all do. It wants to control the outcomes. It wants to protect the ego. It wants to, by all means, avoid uncertainty, right? Why does crises reveal so much about our inner self? Like, why do these old patterns, these fear responses, survival strategies come back so quickly when we are slammed under the hammer?
Because it's at those moments where all these masks we've been wearing, all the ways we try to show up in the world and personas we put on, it's all stripped away and we're left with underneath. And the less you've met that part of you, the more it's going to come out. And it is going to feel like a monster in many ways, whether it's anger or it's self-abandonment or it is self-sabotage, which I think is the biggest one I see, is people just, it's this spiral that happens.
Because it does. It breaks all that stuff away. You said it perfectly, right? And that works psychologically and spiritually. It strips us bare, down to our bare parts. And yes, I'm fond of saying we always rise, or we always fall back to and rise to our lowest level of training, or in this case, our lowest level of healing, right? And this is where we really have to start being honest, because these things show us what we've actually been practicing and training and healing up, right? It shows it to us. And if we've been pretending to practice other things, but really practicing fear inside, it gives fear a microphone and enhances its voice, right? If like I said, if you say you've been practicing openness and learning to let go, but really you've just been practicing control, right? Control is what's going to happen. So, but if you've been practicing stillness and awareness, at least, and a little bit of honesty, and trying to be more faithful and self-trusting, not just faithful in everything else, but self-trusting, faith in yourself. And if you've been really trying to connect and align, crisis will shake the hell out of you, but it won't quite own you anymore, right? That's the difference.
Well, I think it comes back to the whole point of the training we do, the work we do. It is about becoming an alignment with ourselves. When we are wearing masks, when we are trying to get by without being self-aware, we are not approaching life in alignment. We are approaching life in survival. And even in those good moments where you're not feeling like you're surviving, it is this perfectly crafted ecosystem of the people you surround yourself with, the way you show up in your environments, whether that's home, whether that's friends, whether that's work. It is this curation we all do. And that's self-awareness, right? Ask yourself, what is this thing? What have I curated around me that may not be authentic? Because when we're trying to gain people's approval, which is also one of those things that can hide underneath the surface, we may think we don't care what people think, when realistically we're managing people's impressions and interpretations all the time unconsciously.
Yeah, and you're right, because if fear is leading this, fear will exaggerate everything into the microphone that you're giving it. It will turn simple discomfort into some kind of treacherous danger. It will turn just the smallest disagreements into this horrible rejection. It will turn kind of this uncertainty into disaster. A slight inconvenience becomes what? A catastrophe now all of a sudden, right? So we also now we have to start challenging and looking for proof that everything is really falling apart. We have to take some responsibility for that. Because when everything becomes a crisis, and not everything is, in fact, most things probably aren't, right? Your body will never rest. Your nerves will never calm down. You won't be able to access wisdom. Your perspective shrinks in, and every single damn moment of the day feels crazy and urgent. Every problem feels like the final nail in the coffin, right? and this is where this survival thinking becomes dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think one way to tell sort of the path you're on when you're going through crisis, when you're going through life, it's another one of my favorite sayings. What is the part you're playing in your own suffering? Because one of the best ways to tell, are you on the path of light or are you on the path of destruction, is
Mm-hmm.
look at the stories you're telling yourself in crisis. Are the stories you telling you blaming things outside of you, or are you taking ownership of the part you played in your situation? And don't get me
Yes.
wrong, a lot of these situations are not within our grasp. Losing a loved one, getting fired from a job. There are things that are outside of our control, but we could see the signs for many of these things. You
Mm-hmm.
know, a lot of the times when we lose someone, that grief is regret because we didn't show up
Yeah.
more before they passed. A lot of the times that grief is the feeling of I could have treated that person better, or I could have done something different. And often when we have that grief, it's still a story about outside of ourselves, because often that regret comes from wanting to change things outside of our control.
The first code you learn from me is the code of the student, the yet code, right? The first line of that code is emotion yet peace. Now, emotion yet peace does not mean emotion disappears. You guys know this already. You've been listening to us for a long time. It means that we govern our emotions. We can feel the energy of the crisis, if it truly is a crisis, if we've determined that, right? But we do not surrender the throne of ourselves to fear. Fear will yell, the body will freak out and activate, the mind will scan everything it can, but the greater self must remain seated in awareness, in our conscious, right? We must let our higher selves lead.
We can't surrender our sovereignty.
Never, never surrender your sovereignty in that way, because the light will ask, what is actually happening here? What's going on? Is it? And fear will say, oh my God, everything's falling apart, and there'll be alarms going off and everything, right? Okay, so our higher self will ask, well, okay, what's a good next step? What's the right next step? Fear will say, run. And if you can't run, control everything if you can. And when you can't, everything's going to collapse, and then we just react, and that's where we find ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And our higher self says what? Pause. Breathe, man. Breathe, right? See things a little more clearly. Aim wisely. This is how we start to turn that crisis energy into something useful, because we can bring it into alignment. We can aim it towards truth. And I think this stuff really matters right now, because not everything deserves our full alarm, right? So how do we start to begin to tell the difference between a real crisis and our bodies and our nerves just exaggerating a threat?
You know, it's beating a dead horse because we say it every episode. It is the pause. The pause is the most magical place to learn to cultivate, because it's within the pause can you slow the storm around you and realize this is a tornado hitting a state and not the end of the world, right? It is realizing that even though whatever you're going through probably sucks horribly,
Yeah.
it is not the end, and it does not mean that you can't move on from here. You know, one of the
Right.
things I would always tell myself when I was in crisis that would sort of help ground me is, it's just like, if I were to stop, zoom out and look at the world is operating 100% like it would, except for this 0.00002% point of my life.
Right.
Everything else is going on just like nothing's happening. And it's not to say my stuff isn't important, but it's to say that life goes on. That the challenges we go through are so minuscule compared to the grand scheme of things, to the potential of all things. You know, one point I want to go back to with the sovereignty is, again, as I was talking about how the stories we tell ourselves, are we projecting it on the outside world? Are we saying this person hurt me? This person's fucked up? Is it this situation that I'm really upset about? When you do that, you are giving away your sovereignty, because you're giving away your power to things outside of you, instead of taking your power back, accepting your part, and realizing, how can I grow so that I don't have this happen again? That's why we repeat patterns, because we don't learn the lesson. And when we are in these moments of crisis, that is when the universe is calling us. That is when God is calling us to take action and change our lives and become more aligned with who we are. You know, I think one of the biggest areas I see people struggle in crisis, and I think often what crisis wants to tell people, is community. connection to bring this stuff up with the people you trust, because people try to shoulder the weight of this and they start diving into those stories and starts tearing them apart, and they don't allow others to share that burden and that trust, because often they can help you see the things that are out of your awareness. It might hurt. It might be hard to hear, especially if you got real friends. Real friends will call you out on your shit. But that's what you want. You want to see. Truth should be more important.
You may not want it, but that's what you need. Yeah.
Yeah. Truth is more important than having your pain validated and justified, especially if you're causing your own suffering.
Well, and especially if you're doing things that are not true or illusionary, right?
Because that's when this starts stripping away.
Yeah.
Here's a question for you.
You start growing shadow. Yeah.
What role does faith play in this transition?
Huge. And I'm going to reference a conversation that you and I have had offline. And I won't get into any details, but faith is a big part of that too. You know, you guys see Michael and I on here as host and co-host, and you know, we're both hosts or we're both co-hosts, however you want to see it. But we still do our learning and sharing and teaching on the back end, right? And we've been talking a lot about virtue lately, Michael and I, because there is a problem with our virtues and morality. At Ashla, we call these agreements. We don't call them virtues, but they are virtues, right? You'll recognize them: responsibility, respect, family, faith, so on and so forth. Faith is super important in everything we do, because faith is how we build self-trust, right? Self-trust is very important here because, for example, really the way to embody this, the way to flip the script on crisis in our lives and use that energy in a good way, a positive way for us, right, is to first trust ourselves enough to know if this is real or not. Is this actually a crisis? Am I actually in danger? Because sometimes we are. A lot of times we're not. And if you don't have faith in yourself, you don't have faith in a higher power, you don't have faith in your higher self, whatever it may be, right, then you don't have any trust. And without trust, it's hard to find truth. And everything starts falling apart without faith, right? Faith is one of the most important linchpins in all of this stuff. We don't always talk about it a lot, though, do we?
No.
We always kind of just assume that we're all faithful, right? But faith is paramount here, because faith leads to trust, and trust helps us find truth. And without truth, what's the point of any of this, right? So, yeah, without faith and trust, how do we know? How can we even start to embody this? How can we start to change this energy from something that's crushing us into something that's liberating us? And that is having enough trust in ourselves and trust in our higher selves or in a higher power, right? To know what is actually happening here, right? Because if there is really a crisis happening, we cannot deny it. We cannot, right, pretend like there is no danger or something. We have to now ask, what is driving me? What am I serving? The goal now is, when we're in a crisis, is to find our direction, right? What do these moments require of my greater self? That's another faith and trust question.
That's a good question.
Right? What is the next right step? That's another faith and trust question. These, having faith and in turn trust, is how you move from survival to creation. Because survival will ask, Michael, how do we survive this? How do we escape this? Your higher self, your God self, your conscious self, the one that is in charge, your faithful, trusting self, right, is going to say, what is this moment asking me to become? Not how do I escape this? What is this asking me to become?
Preach it.
And that question matters most, because crisis can bring up these old patterns, but that question interrupts that completely, right? It cuts it off. It slams the door shut on that old stuff, right?
Well, and I think, especially when it comes to the higher self, the more we can, again, take responsibility for what's ahead of us, for what we need to do, for what the universe is calling us to do, the more we'll find clarity, the more we'll find direction.
Right. Yeah. And faith and trust and truth are very important on the path of Ashla, because they bring us into alignment. They take our scattered self and bring it back into integrity, into alignment. Right? We want to aim at the truth. We want to aim with courage. We want to aim, toward healing and service and responsibility, as you said. Responsibility is very important for us here because there's a sacred shift that happens when you start trusting and you start asking these questions. Because you start to understand that now you don't have to become the crisis. The crisis is happening. And part of the reason for the crisis may be parts of you, but they are not you. You do not ever have to become the fear. You do not have to identify with the panic. Meet the moment. That is what self-mastery is. Do you have any final thoughts for the show before we move into the exercises and the good stuff?
If there's someone in crisis, don't be afraid to reach out. Again, we are not mental health professionals. We are not medical professionals. We offer this work for education purposes to help people better understand their lives. And if you are in crisis, pause. Because I think a few important points we brought up in this episode is one, how detrimental is this crisis? How much is your life being completely uprooted right now to the point of no repair? Because more often than not, life is asking something of you, not taking something from you. It is in these moments that you can become the best version of yourself. There's this analogy I love. It was in my last blog I wrote about the jar. When we have grief, grief does not go away. Grief does not shrink. Instead, the container we have the grief in has to expand around the grief so that the grief becomes less of a hole inside of us. Because the size of the grief doesn't go away, but the size of our container can always grow. We must trust ourselves. We must have faith in ourselves that we can get through these obstacles and that we can become better on the other side of it.
Yeah. And as we're fond of saying, just to piggyback on something there, God, the universe, our higher selves, it'll tap. And then it'll start smacking you around. And then it'll start Spartan kicking you through doors sometimes until you pay attention.
It'll only get louder and louder.
It just gets louder and louder. The shadow will grow bigger and bigger until we face it. So our exercise for today, we're going to start trying to reframe the crises that happen in our life. And this one's going to involve your journal. And try to take it like 10 minutes with your journal here. And the first step is to name one current or recent crisis or difficult things that you're going through or maybe a lot of stress or pressure. And I want you to ask yourself, what did fear immediately tell you that this stuff meant to you? For example, did fear say, well, it's over for us, buddy, right? Or did fear make you say, I cannot handle this, whatever it is? Or I'm going to fail, or I'm unsafe, or everything around me is falling apart, right? Those are just some examples. Step 3, of course, you're going to ask, what is actually happening, right? What is actually happening? Don't exaggerate. Don't get dramatic. Just put it out there. What's actually happening? Right? Step 4 would be to ask yourself now, what aligned outcome am I serving here, right? Am I serving clarity? Am I serving healing or right action or stability? Or am I serving fear? Or am I serving control? Or am I serving attachment, right? It's okay to not be doing great here, right? It's okay. This is why we do this stuff. Now, step 5, no matter what your answers were, step 5, you're going to now ask a new question. What is one conscious response you can take for whatever it is whatever answers you got there? And I want you to close this exercise with this affirmation. Probably more like a mantra, maybe. But it is, I meet this moment with awareness. I do not surrender myself to fear. I allow the light to reveal the next step. And come back to this exercise as many times as you need. And only work on one thing a week. That's perfect. That's great practice. That'll build great discipline in this practice. Anything you want to add to that practice, Michael?
I think when you brought up how if it's just one thing, let it be one thing. When we try to change everything at once, nothing gets changed at all. You got to meet yourself where you're at, and you got to be honest about where that's at. If you think you need to start hitting the gym because you need to start building your confidence back up and you haven't exercised in 10 years, don't make hitting the gym every day your goal. Make going on a walk your goal. Make Lifting weights once a week, your goal. Start small, build yourself up from there. Because when crisis comes, it does not promise transformation. It offers opportunity. And that is the most important part here. I remember, and it's, again, this is not a linear path. I am so thankful at a young age, I learned that when we go through hard times, we usually gain a lot of good awareness and skills from that suffering. And so I've always, whenever I've gone through hard times, I've always looked for what do I need to learn here? And I feel blessed to have had that awareness. But I will tell you, even with that awareness, when I thought I was at my lowest, I was fucking wrong. That life humbled me and humbled me and humbled me until I thought I was the smallest thing on the planet. And only then did I start getting the strength I needed to become something greater than I was. And it wasn't because I became someone else. It's because I figured out who I actually was.
You stepped into you. Yeah. And you're not so bad. I take you over any fake person you've ever come up with that I've met before.
I'll take that. I'll take the same thing.
Our affirmations. I can meet crisis without losing myself. The energy of fear can be transformed into courage and right action. I do not let panic choose my direction. The light remains present, even in difficulty. And I respond from awareness, not survival alone. And our journal prompts. What situation am I treating like a crisis that may need more perspective? Where has fear exaggerated the danger? What aligned goal do I need to keep in mind? What creative opportunity might exist within this difficulty? And what would my greater self do in response to this moment? Look, crisis will come. Comes for us all, right? Doesn't care about any of the arbitrary human things that all of us like to identify with and try to use or run from. It does not care. It comes for us all. The path of light, the path of goodness, all these different paths that we walk, none of them promise otherwise either. But crisis does not have to become a total collapse of our being, right? Fear can rise, but fear can also be managed, and it can be put behind our higher self. It doesn't have to lead. The pressure is always going to be there, but pressure doesn't have to break you, right? We talk about being flexible. Right, Michael? Difficulty may interrupt the life you plan, but it might also reveal a doorway that you didn't see before, one that offers better opportunity. So as you move forward from this episode, I want you to ask yourself, where are these things, these crises and this pressure and stress could be asking me to awaken? Where is fear trying to choose the target for me? Right? What doorway might be hidden from me inside of this difficulty? Meet the moment. Right? Be present, not perfect, and then choose the right next step. That's really the most important thing we can do. If this episode resonated with you, take a moment to like and subscribe and follow the podcast, follow our YouTube page, follow us on Facebook. Well, I like to pepper different things throughout the different social media, so you don't always get the same things in each place. And share it with someone who may be walking through a difficult season right now and needs to remember that crises don't have to become a total collapse. You know, we build these teachings and we do these podcasts to help people return to awareness, to remember. And your support helps us carry the work further. So check us out on the YouTubes, the TikToks, the Spotify, Instagrams, the Apple Podcast, anywhere podcast is. You can find a podcast. The greatest website ever.
Newashla.com.
Newashla.com. And yeah. So look, meet crisis with awareness and turn fear into courage. And then walk through that doorway that you find. With love and gratitude. Ad Lucem.
Ad Lucem.